Matthew, who was just 9 years old, continued vomiting blood from his mouth until he died. Matthew. Matthew. His mother called out to him, but he was already dead. God. Please, this is not happening. Josephine shouted loudly. Mr. Joseph, who was Matthew's father, continued shaking his son in pain, but Matthew was already dead. Just like a dream, Matthew truly died. Well, I know you are wondering what happened to him. Now let me take you to how it all started. It all started earlier that month, which was December. Mr. Joseph got a message from his mother in the village that she wants them to come spend Christmas with her in the village. Mr. Joseph was the type of man who loved his mother a lot, although his mom was very old. So when his wife came back from the market, he told her about what his mother had told him. Josephine was very happy when her husband told her that they would be spending the Christmas holiday with her mother-in-law. Honey, that's great news. I have never spent the Christmas season with Mama before, so tell me when you are going. Josephine asked. Well, darling, we might be leaving by the weekend, so inform the kids. I'm sure they will also be happy to be with Mama. Mr. Joseph replied. So that evening, when Mr. Joseph and his entire family gathered together at the dining table, Josephine delivered the good news to her 3 kids about them spending their Christmas holidays in the village with their grandma. Well, Mr. Joseph has 3 kids named Victor, Anna, and Matthew. When the kids heard what their mom had said, they all became happy immediately. So during the weekdays, all the kids were busy arranging their clothes and preparing for the village. Mr. Joseph also went to the supermarket to get a very big loaf of bread for his mom. So, like magic, it was already the weekend. Mr. Joseph and his family left very early so they could arrive at the village quickly. The journey was easier for them because Mr. Joseph has a car of his own. After 4 hours of driving, they finally reached the village. Mr. Joseph drove into his mother's compound and packed his car. Mama was already waiting for their arrival, so immediately they came, and she stood up to welcome them. Matthew, who was the last child of Joseph, quickly ran to meet his grandmother while Josephine and her husband packed out their luggage from the car. My son, you are welcome. Mama said to Mr. Joseph. My daughter. I hope you are taking good care of my son. Mama asked jokingly. Yes, Ma. Josephine replied. I trust you, my daughter. Let's go inside the house. Thank you, Mama. How have you been? Josephine asked her mother-in-law as they walked into the house. I'm doing great. Mama replied. To their surprise, Mama had already prepared a very delicious meal waiting for them. After arranging their luggage in their respective rooms, they all gathered together to eat as one big family. Matthew, who was Josephine's last child, loves to eat a lot, so Grandma gave him a large portion of food. Everyone ate and ate till they got filled and tired. It was a happy moment for the whole family. But something strange happened that day. Night came as fast as lightning. Victor, Anna, and Matthew were sleeping in one room while Mr. Joseph and his wife were sharing another room. Then Grandma has her own room separately. Although the whole room was in one building, Josephine woke up immediately. She heard a sound like someone's footsteps. She looked at her husband. He was far asleep. She looked at the time. It was 12 a.m., which might be sharp. So she stood up and walked slowly without making any sounds, opened the door silently, and sneaked out. Josephine walked silently to the living room and then looked through the window. She was shocked by what she saw. She saw her mother-in-law dressed in a black gown, standing closer to a tree in the compound, holding a small cloth in her hands. What could my mother-in-law be doing outside by this time of the night? It was a scary night for Josephine. She began to ask herself if she was dreaming. She closed and opened her eyes and realized that she wasn't dreaming. This is really serious, she said to herself. Her mother-in-law began to say things that Josephine didn't really understand. After she said those words, she lay down on a very flat and big leaf, and she disappeared. Josephine almost fainted when she saw what happened. Josephine began to ask herself different questions. Is my mother-in-law a witch? If she is not, then when did she disappear in a black gown? I think I have to tell my husband about this. Immediately, Josephine walked silently, with fear, back into her room. When she entered the room, she realized her husband was still sleeping, so she didn't bother to wake him up. She prayed and went back to bed. Although she didn't sleep in peace because she was still thinking about what she saw that night. When Josephine woke up the next morning, after the morning prayers with her husband, she told her husband that the village was not safe for them anymore. "Darling, why will you say such a thing?" her husband asked. "Honey, I know what I am saying. This village is not safe for us anymore. We need to go back to the city immediately," Josephine said. "How can you say we should go back to the city immediately? I mean, we just arrived at the village yesterday, and you are saying we should go back immediately. Remember, we are here to spend the Christmas holidays with Mama," Mr. Joseph replied. "Honey, I know, but I just feel like it's not safe anymore." "Stop feeling like that. Is there anything wrong? Look, I don't understand what you are saying. I am very hungry right now, and I know Mama must have prepared something already," Mr. Joseph said, leaving the room. Josephine was just sitting in confusion. "I think I have to be very careful with that," my mother-in-law said, standing up and going straight to the living room. Entering the living room, she saw that breakfast was already served and was prepared by her mother-in-law, although Josephine was scared of eating the meal. The three children were already hungry and ready to smash the food. The whole family gathered around the dining table, and they began to pray. After the prayer, they ate the food, and they all began their daily activities. Well, the kids had nothing to do, so they all went outside to play. While Josephine was busy arranging some of the clothes they used the previous day, Mr. Joseph and his mother were under a mango in the compound discussing when they heard a loud scream from the children. Immediately, Victor, who was the first child, ran to his father and told him that Matthew was vomiting blood from his mouth. "Stop joking. How can you say Matthew is vomiting blood from his mouth?" his dad shouted at him. "Daddy, I am not joking. We were all playing together when he started vomiting blood," Victor said. Immediately, his father stood and ran to where Matthew was and realized it was true. "Go and call your mother immediately," Mr. Joseph said. Immediately, Anna went inside and told his mother what was happening. Josephine quickly rushed outside and met her last child in that condition. "Honey, what happened?" Josephine said it with sadness. There was no hospital closer to where they were staying in the village, so they were trying their best to stop the bleeding. Matthew, who was just 9 years old, continued vomiting blood from his mouth until he died. "Matthew! Matthew!" His mother called out to him, but he was already dead. "God! Please, this is not happening!" Josephine shouted loudly. Mr. Joseph, who was Matthew's father, continued shaking his son in pain, but Matthew was already dead.